But we come from two different worlds, Mr. Wayne. I wasn't like you or the kids you took in. I was a pretty bad kid once. Real Batman never talked to you much, did he? That's probably why you were so fixated on him.
Batman! Don't play psychoanalyst with me, boy!
Apophenia, noun. The tendency to see connections where none exist. Did you come here just to make fun of my work?
Checkmate.
You're not going to help me, are you?
No, sir. I am not.
Get out of my head!
Not all Avengers are given the same treatment as Iron Man or Captain America.
But that doesn't mean we don't love them and want to see them rise to that level.
It's somewhat weird to think about the fact that this person on our list was an Avenger, but he was. And honestly, he was kind of great on the team, even developing a relationship with Janet during his time there. That's right, we're talking about Alex Summers, aka the mutant hero Havoc. Havoc has had a complicated relationship with heroics throughout his life. Initially, he wanted nothing to do with being a hero, but found himself dragged into the superhero lifestyle anyway, due to him being a mutant and constantly getting tangled up in stories involving the X-Men. However, I feel like being on the Avengers actually suits him better as a character, also allowing him to get out from under his brother Scott's very long shadow. Havoc is very much a middle child, and I feel like often gets stuck as a result of this, so it was nice to see him come into his own. In general, I feel like Havoc simply doesn't get a lot to do in the comics. He was with Maddie during Dark X-Men recently and was heavily featured in Hellions, but in both of those stories he kind of feels like a side character somewhat. And in Hellions we basically were just dealing with all of Alex's trauma, which, you know, while important and I did love, don't get me wrong, I would still just like to see Alex when he's in his power a little bit more. And lately that's been missing somewhat from the comics with his character, I think.
Leave the saving of the world to the men? Silverclaw doesn't think so. Silverclaw is the daughter of mortal Jamie Santiago and a volcano goddess. The goddess gave Silverclaw to her father as a gift. She was to be the protector of his village. As Silverclaw was growing up, her powers began to show. Those powers are kinda like shape-shifting, specifically regarding animals native to South American jungles and forests. She doesn't need to fully transform her body into an animal to take on the characteristics of it. She assumes a form that combines her human appearance with the animals. She's done this with jaguars, monkeys, pumas, and more. Silverclaw was headed to America to meet up with Jarvis, oddly enough. She was his sponsor child. Her flight was hijacked, and the only way to ensure the other passengers' safety was if she agreed to help the bad guys. Eventually, the Avengers show up, defeat everybody, Silverclaw explains her side of the story, and the Avengers let her join so she can help them track down the hijackers. They thwarted the bad guys, and Silverclaw remained on the team.
Honestly, I just really love Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, and lately I feel like we haven't gotten enough of her. Unlike some of the others on our list though, Janet has at least gotten her dues in the past. I mean, she is also one of the original Avengers, but in the modern comics landscape, I feel like both Jan and her adopted, sort of in a weird way, stepdaughter, Nadia Van Dyne, have both fallen by the wayside.
We know Hawkeye, he's clearly doing well if his hit TV show and mainstream fame is anything to go by, but he had to learn all his skills from somebody. One of his teachers was Swordsman. He met Hawkeye while working in the circus. Swordsman's circus act was shockingly sword and knife based, and when Hawkeye finished his sword training, they were often a duo. Swordsman is an Avenger now, but he wasn't always a stellar citizen. He has robbed people and left people for dead and gotten himself banned from multiple countries and originally joined the Avengers as a double agent, but he eventually had a change of heart due to his heart. During a period where Swordsman is taking a required break from the Avengers, he ends up working for this gangster, and that's where he meets the eventual love of his life, Mantis. Mantis said she can fix him, and she did. Now Swordsman has the self-respect needed to 100% leave crime behind, and the pair rejoined the Avengers. It went well, but it didn't end well. He died. It was super tragic. Mantis yells "darling," it's a moment moment. He comes back in the form of a sentient tree eventually, then dies again, then is revived again during the Chaos War, then died again. He deserves better than that. All that character development for what? He also has a really cool sword. It can shoot energy rays.
I personally love Monica a lot. She's just a strong member of the Avengers who honestly very rarely gets enough love in the comics. However, it is important to note that there are pockets here and there for us Monica fans, but I do wish we just got more of her in general, especially as a leader, which I think Monica is pretty great at doing. Monica Rambeau was a leader of the Avengers for a while. Monica Rambeau was a leader of the Avengers for a while in the 80s, but her time in that role was pretty short-lived due to her being tricked and manipulated into giving up leadership by Dr. Druid after she was fatally wounded in a battle. Not only did Monica Rambeau lose her role as leader, but she was also zapped of her powers at this time because that happened in the confrontation that also wounded her, prompting her to give up her leadership role. So she was all around severely nerfed at that time, and also mainly because Dr. Druid was working to betray his teammates this all happened. Monica would also be known as the first woman to use the mantle of Captain Marvel. That's right, a lot of people think it's Carol Danvers, but it was actually Monica. But after leaving the Avengers would lose that name as well and go on to become Photon instead. Now she had to give up her name because Captain Marvel's son appeared kinda out of the blue in the comics and wanted to use the name for himself. Fortunately, Monica would go on to lead the Next Wave team later on in her career, but she would also later find out that she had been manipulated into this role by Beyond. And even after fighting back against the Beyond Corporation, who is admittedly evil, she would have her personality altered due to this traumatic experience. So yeah, it's been a very mixed bag for Monica throughout her history, sadly. A lot of ups, a lot of downs, and a lot of the things that I love to read her in, she also kinda gets messed up in.
One thing about me, I love Sleepwalker. I think he is so neat, and trust and believe if I can get him on a list, I will. The MCU judges books by their cover because at first, multiple Avengers think Sleepwalker is a villain. That is not the case. He is a good guy. Sleepwalker is not just his name, but also his job. The Mindscape is a dimension that is in all sentient things, including you and I. It has beings in it whose sole purpose is to be evil and make people go insane by invading their mind. The Sleepwalkers stop this from happening and protect the minds of innocents. One of these Sleepwalkers was tricked by a longtime enemy into entering the mind of Rick Sheridan. They fought in the dream, but when the villain escaped, our hero was trapped and bonded to Rick. Eventually, Rick learned of his Sleepwalker buddy, and the two became co-inhibitors of Rick's mind. The Sleepwalker used his time on Earth to fight the evil entities from the Mindscape that materialized in the physical world. He was a member of Operation Lightning Storm, and being a part of this initiative when Quiet Man started causing problems, Sleepwalker got recruited to the Avengers to help out.
Quazar never gets enough love in my opinion. I'm not sure if it's because he has a similar vibe to Captain Marvel, or even at times in a weird way, not really power related, but Wonder Man. And both Marvel and Simon are just put above Wendell for some reason. But ever since I read more about Quazar in Dazzler, which I highly recommend you check out if you haven't already, I became more intrigued by his character, and then as a result disappointed when I learned he wasn't really as prominently featured today as some other heroes are, for some reason. Granted, Quazar, while niche, has still been in hundreds of issues. Still, I wish he had his own book today, or at least appeared more regularly in someone else's solo series, or was just like on a team. Honestly, I miss the days of the old Dazzler comic. I loved him as a supporting character there. I just want to relive those days. Also bring the Dazzler series back, it's so good.
The rootinest tootinest cowboy in the Wild Wild West, Two Gun Kid. He isn't technically a cowboy, but he sure does look and act like one. Personally, I love the musical Oklahoma and by extension the cowboy aesthetic, so to me, this hero absolutely deserves the world. He is not supercharged, he is just a guy that wanted to be a hero. He trained until he was an expert gunfighter and horseback rider. He's also a master of the lasso, iconic. He is from the 1870s, he did all his training in the 1870s and grew very, very famous. Think like Annie Oakley, Billy the Kid. So how did he end up in the modern era? When the Avengers were fighting time-traveling thorn in their side Kang the Conqueror, they ended up conveniently in the same time as Two Gun. Two Gun was obviously interested in the people from the future and helped them fight. He did good and was offered a reserve spot in the 20th century, which worked out well. He could explore everything the modern world had to offer and only help the Avengers Avengers when absolutely necessary. Getting homesick for the homestead, he returned to his era eventually, but continued to help the Avengers whenever they visited. Two Gun Kid is part of the reason heroes like Hawkeye and Angel came to be. Hawkeye was inspired by Two Gun's heroism and took up the style when he became a hero, and Angel, before he was Angel, was Two Gun's doctor in his old age. Two Gun made sure to tell him about the heroes of the future, and those stories ended up inspiring Angel to become Angel. Two Gun Kid had an impact.
Look, I saw Madam Web, and it was an experience, to put it lightly. Of course, for this list, we're talking about Julia Carpenter's Madam Web though, not Cassandra, but to be honest, I wasn't too happy with how she was featured in the film either. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of why it was bad here, because that would be honestly a whole other video. In fact, I've actually done 2 on that subject on my own channel, but trust me when I say it's a disaster of a film, okay? Just trust me. It's just so bad, and it feels like it undermines the powerful and much beloved character of Julia Carpenter, as well as honestly everyone else, but we're talking about Julia. Julia was the second woman to take up the Spider-Woman mantle after Jessica Drew, and it was during her time as Spider-Woman that she came to have a few adventures with the main Avengers team, later going on to fully join the West Coast Avengers. And I just think she's great. She doesn't get enough praise.
Hi, before I say this state name, I would like to clarify again, I'm Canadian, so please don't make fun of me, I will say it wrong. The man from Massachusetts, Dane Whitman, the Black Knight. The Black Knight is a mantle that gets passed down, so there have been a bunch, and not always good guys. The Black Knight, before Dane, his uncle, was a villain and requested that Dane not be. Good news, Dane wasn't, he joined the Avengers. He got on the Avengers' radar by telling them Magneto captured 2 of their teammates. He doesn't join right away, he spends some time at his family's estate first, a castle. You learn pretty quick that the Black Knight has a very specific medieval aesthetic. The Black Knight travels by Pegasus, and he has this really cool weapon called the Ebony Blade. The Ebony Blade is a double-edged sword, but seriously, it gives the wielder basically immunity and can cut through anything. But it will slowly corrupt its user, that's the downside. Black Knight officially joined the Avengers after defeating Kang together, but he had been an ally to them long before that. He was a great asset to the team. He wasn't just a great fighter with epic transportation, he was also incredibly intelligent. Black Knight might finally be getting the mainstream fame he deserves. He was in the MCU movie Eternals, played by Kit Harington. He wasn't like a major character, but at the end we see him gain possession of the Ebony Blade, so it's pretty clear it's him. And with Kit Harington in the role, it's definitely something to look forward to, even if we don't know when we'll see the character again on screen.
At number 10 is Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon. Thank you to Rodney Lindsay 849 for suggesting him in part 1 of the series. Sam Wilson is the guy who became the new Captain America after Steve Rogers hung up his shield. But here's the thing, in the Avengers, even though he took on Cap's mantle, he's not exactly getting the spotlight he deserves. See, Steve Rogers, the OG captain, is a tough act to follow, no doubt, but Sam's got the heart, the skills, and the wings to match. He's proven himself time and time again, but fans still don't give him the credit he's due. Let's not forget, he's carrying on the legacy of Captain America himself, and that's no small task. But nevertheless, Wilson's a great successor. This guy's got some mad skills. He can fly like a boss with those wingsuit thingies, plus he's got his vibranium shield that he rocks just as good as Cap did. But for some reason, he's often just pushed to the sidelines. At number 9 is White Tiger. Thank you to Victor Sage _. You might not have heard much about her, and that's honestly a real shame. White Tiger, aka Ava Ayala, made her appearance in the Ultimate Spider-Man and some Lego Marvel games. She's got a pretty cool backstory too, being the sister of Hector Ayala, the original White Tiger. But here's the thing, she's been kind of left in the shadows. With her agility, strength, and that insanely underrated mystical amulet she's got the potential to be a real force on the Avengers team. There's also that whole fling with Peter Parker that fans seem to be really really into. So it's high time we get to see more of White Tiger in action. She's got what it takes to be one of the strongest Avengers, and it's about time she got the recognition she deserves. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. I would really appreciate it. At number 8, we got Hercules. The Avengers have housed a plethora of gods, you guys. But you see, when people think about godly Avengers, usually it's Thor that hogs the spotlight. But hold on a second, because Hercules deserves some serious recognition too. He's got the strength, the charisma, and an impressive set of abs, yet he often plays second fiddle to the god of thunder. Imagine being a god yourself and still living under someone else's shadow. Not cool, right? Like, even when you go into Herc's fandom wiki, his featured quote is literally a self-comparison to Thor about how whatever Thor can do, Hercules can do even mightier. It seems like no matter what, if Hercules is a part of the conversation, Thor has to be too. Or Maestro, I guess, but you get my point, right? Hercules deserves better. He's taken on cosmic threats, lifted entire mountains, and shown that he's more than just a pretty face. Let's give Herc some time to shine, Marvel. After all, the Avengers could use a bit more divine power in their ranks. At number 7 is Loki. Wait, what? Now, you might be thinking, why are you even considering Loki the literal antagonist of the first Avengers movie in a discussion about the Avengers? Well, it's because Loki is one of those characters who doesn't neatly fit into the good or bad box. He's kind of like that friend who's mostly a pain, but sometimes has moments of real kindness. When it comes to the Avengers, we often focus on the big names, but Loki's different. He's a trickster, a troublemaker, and he's caused his fair share of chaos, but deep down, there's a part of him that wants to do the right thing, and frankly, that's what makes his character so fascinating. So is Loki good or bad? Well, it's not that simple. See, people aren't just good or bad, they're a mix of both, and Loki here is no exception. He's made mistakes, but he's also shown that he can change and do the right thing when it counts. And so in the end, whether you think Loki deserves better or not, there's one thing for sure. He's a character who keeps us guessing, and that's what makes him one of the most intriguing Avengers of them all. And number 6 is Quicksilver, recommended by Nelson SC 9670 and Rodney Lindsay 849. Again, Quicksilver bit the bullet way too early in the MCU. I mean, don't get me wrong, Wanda's cool and all with her reality-bending powers, but her brother Pietro, aka Quicksilver, well, he definitely got the short end of the stick. See, he's got super speed, which is super awesome, but here's the deal. Quicksilver didn't get nearly enough screen time or development in the movies. I mean, sure, he had his moments, but they were just glimpses of what he could do. With a power like super speed, there's so much potential for epic action sequences. I mean, we've all seen the X-Men scenes. He could have been a real game changer in the MCU battles. Plus, he's also got that snarky attitude that could have added some humor to the team. So let's give Quicksilver the love he deserves, and maybe, just maybe, if fans cry loud enough, maybe we'll get another shot in the MCU. At number 5 is Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones is an Avenger who's been on the sidelines for way too long. You might have recognized her from her Netflix series, but in the comics, she's a powerhouse. Super strength, durability, and some mean investigative skills. Yet she's often overshadowed by big names like Iron Man and Thor. Now, while she's not out there space battling aliens, her street level heroics are just as vital. Imagine if she had just a little more screen time and a chance to shine alongside the heavier hitters. Jessica Jones deserves way more recognition and a bigger role in the MCU. At number 4 is War Machine. Now, many people just think of War Machine as sort of an Iron Man light, but he deserves way more credit than that. I mean, come on, his name is literally War Machine. The guy's suit of armor is loaded with firepower. Sure, he doesn't have the same level of tech or even charisma as Tony Stark, but he's a vital member of the team. Think about it, War Machine is a military asset that brings a different set of skills to the table. He's got the experience, the discipline, and the tactical know-how. Plus, the suit of his can go toe-to-toe with some serious threats. So let's not forget about War Machine when we talk about the Avengers, because he's definitely one of the strongest and deserves a lot more recognition. And number 3 is Jack of Hearts, recommended by Robert Pike 5670. Now, the Jack of Hearts isn't your typical Avenger. See, he's got this super crazy cosmic power, like he can manipulate energy and stuff. Sort of like he's a walking nuclear reactor. But here's the thing, he's always kind of been underrated despite his insanely powerful superpowers. He's been in and out of the Avengers, never really getting the spotlight he deserves. I mean, okay, just imagine having that kind of power and not being in the spotlight. It's like having a Lamborghini and just keeping it in the garage, am I right? The Jack of Hearts is definitely one of the strongest Avengers, period, and it's about time he got the recognition he deserves. And number 2 is Madame Web. There's one character who's been lurking in the shadows, and I'm not talking about a stealthy superhero. I'm talking about Cassandra Webb here, aka Madame Web. Now, Madame Web is kind of like the unsung hero of the Marvel Universe. See, she's got this crazy ability to see into the future and across the multiverse. Basically, she's the ultimate guidance counselor for Spider-Man. But here's the thing, folks, she's been nowhere to be found in the movies. Not in the MCU, not in the Spider-Verse films, nada. I mean, come on, with her powers, she could have helped the Avengers dodge a lot of disasters. So let's hope one day Madame Web gets her time in the spotlight, because she's the unsung hero in the background who deserves a lot more love on the big screen in the foreground. And at number 1 is Black Widow. Honestly, I'm stunned that nobody mentioned Natasha Romanoff in the comments of part 1, which is surprising, because if there's any superhero who got relegated to the sidelines during the entire run of the MCU, it's Natasha Romanoff. Now, what's impressive about her is that she's just a regular human being, no superpowers, yet she's keeping pace with all of these superhuman heavy hitters. But here's the kicker, she even went as far as to sacrifice herself during Infinity War, way before she even got her own solo film. Like, talk about a major oof. I mean, sure, eventually we got that prequel, but I mean, it would have been nice to see her come back at the end of Endgame. She deserved a lot more screen time, don't you think? You see, the strongest superheroes aren't just the ones with the flashiest powers, and Black Widow, being a human who just basically went to the gym her entire life, definitely proved that.
Number 10, Hellstrom. Hellstrom is Daimon Hellstrom, also sometimes going by the name Daimon Hellstorm, the son of Satan. His initial appearance in Marvel Comics was shrouded in controversy due to him being marked as, well, you know, the son of the devil. But in recent years, this all died down with the ultimate dissolution of the Comic Code Authority, which made moral judgment calls on what subject matter could be covered or touched upon, even in comics, a lot less controversial, let's just say, for the most part. Daimon's father might not actually be the devil, as a few in Marvel Comics have made claims to this title. But either way, he still has become the ruler of at least a hell dimension, thanks to his birthright. While Daimon is not known for appearing on the main Avengers team, he is known for being married to a fellow Avenger in the past, Hellcat, and has been a member of the Savage Avengers, which is why I'm counting him here. Although, lately, I feel like he's been a little less hero-y in the comics. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? Do it, it's good for you. You know what people say? An apple a day keeps the doctor away, a like a day keeps me at bay from telling you all of that all the time. Number 9, Hellcat. We don't talk about Patsy Walker Hellcat that often on Top 10 Nerd, but lately, I don't know, I've just been in kind of like a Hellcat kind of mood, I guess. Hellcat is definitely a hero who is overlooked on the Avengers roster, and honestly, her history has granted her some pretty unique and fun powers. I had fun looking back into Hellcat's past to be like, oh yeah, she has all these cool things. She has some magical abilities, including the ability to basically like dodge magic and see through illusions, making her hard to target for any magic users. She even can tap into a demonic side of herself, calling upon demonic energy to give her a boost in certain realms and in certain instances. It's conditional, but still is pretty cool. Number 8, Hawkeye. Hawkeye is often thought of as just being a guy with some arrows who is really good aim, kinda is that. But the fact that he's one of the few human members of the Avengers who doesn't have any superpowers per se, other than maybe like really enhanced eyesight, but not superpowered, just like abnormally good in ways that sometimes don't make sense, is exactly why he deserves more respect, more love, more admiration from us all. Hawkeye's Clint Barton doesn't have powers to rely on, and he still manages to keep up with the rest of his teammates. That's pretty awesome, I gotta say. I wasn't always a Clint fan, but I like Clint Barton, he's pretty cool. Number 7, Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman is another character who sometimes gets shafted in the comics, and she is a character who often gets compared to her seeming male counterpart, Spider-Man. Although truth be told, in canon continuity, Spider-Woman actually is older than Peter, and therefore in comic books history anyways, she was actually Spider-Woman before Peter was Spider-Man. She's canonically older, so I mean, she has a kid and everything. Something Peter has never really even been allowed to do permanently as a character, settle down, have kids, and grow up, all that good stuff. Although I would say that the fun of Jessica Drew is that she might be adulting really hard, but she never really fully grows up. She's always fun, sassy, and still figuring out so much of her life as she goes through it. To me, she's always been not only fun and badass, but also a relatable character, which is why I feel like she deserves to be featured more and get more respect from Marvel writers and fans alike, hence why she's on this list. Number 6. Black Knight. Honestly, probably one of the most underappreciated heroes we have as leader of the Avengers is the Black Knight. That's right, he was a leader of the Avengers, everyone. The Black Knight is a character who feels like lately he has faded into obscurity somewhat. I thought maybe with Kit Harington, made famous for his role as reluctant hero Jon Snow in the series Game of Thrones, playing Dane Whitman in the Eternals movie, we might actually see a resurgence of this character in the comics, and I was hyped for that, bolstered by his MCU appearance. However, while Dane's role as the Black Knight was teased at the end of the film with the appearance of his ancestral cursed sword, the Ebony Blade, we have yet to hear anything about the development of his announced series, and even Harington himself says he's basically in the dark on what Marvel's plans might be involving this character. So it seems like we might have to wait a bit longer for Black Knight to get the respect he so deserves from modern day fans, but hopefully that's coming at some point soon. Like, come on, Marvel, give me the Black Knight series, give me something, I want it. I feel like it could be cool and it would be very different. Number 5. Vision. Vision hasn't really had a major focus on him in some time. I love that he agreed to join up with Carol's Avengers and as such is getting more time on the Avengers team in the present day, where he can once more be in the spotlight. But I do feel like there was a little period in there where Vision wasn't really doing much of anything. Vision might seem like a boring character devoid of personality because he's an android, but I would argue that at times he is maybe more human than the rest of his teammates. There are moments in the comics where for me he reminds me of another android that I know and love, Data from Star Trek. Often it is his humanity that seems to motivate him and also seems to be something that Viz struggles with as well, both in realizing its existence within himself and in accepting that human part of himself. Like, I mean, you gotta realize it before you can accept it, but even when I feel like he's kind of like, oh, maybe that's what's going on, I feel like he's not willing to fully embrace his humanity. I know he's an android, but sometimes he's just some really human stuff, guys. Number 4. She-Hulk. She-Hulk recently just had her own solo series, which as far as I've read thus far is amazing, by the way. I haven't finished it yet, but yeah. That series unfortunately just ended, and honestly it bums me out. She-Hulk is Jennifer Walters, who contrary to some very loud opinions, is not just a gender-swapped version of the Hulk. She is her own character in her own right, being Bruce Banner's cousin, who he came to shortly after his transformation into the Hulk, kinda seeking some help from Jen. However, during his visit, Jen was attacked by criminals who were worried that she, as a lawyer, was going to take down their boss. A very real threat, since Jen is actually a pretty great criminal lawyer, or was so at the time anyways. Now she's more into superhero lawyering, but still. After this attack on her life and Bruce being forced into giving her an emergency blood transfusion to save it, Jen Walters was forever changed into the sometimes monster, mostly hero, She-Hulk. She-Hulk has had a tumultuous path throughout the comics, having her highs and her lows. She has had long runs and short runs, and I'm kinda disappointed she isn't doing more these days, especially considering she also just got her own Disney Plus series, so you'd think that would help to give her character a comic book boost, but not really apparently. Her recent series didn't even make it to 20 issues sadly, and like I said, it honestly was great. I'm not fully up to date, but trust me, the issues I've read are really good. You should check it out. It's like classic She-Hulk. It felt so like original She-Hulk times. Ugh, so good. Number 3. Captain Marvel. I would argue that in a way, Carol is only recently starting to get her due. Captain Marvel has been and always will be one of the strongest Avengers around when it comes to the team. She is a cosmic powerhouse who has overcome a ton of adversity, but when it comes to her getting the respect that she deserves, she has had honestly a rough past. There was the whole thing with Marcus Immortus, see Avengers 197 through 200 for that fiasco, and then there was Civil War II, which saw Carol deal with some major character issues regarding how she was presented and written at that time. She became the villain of the story that should have honestly been equal in terms of which Avenger fans sided with, like in Civil War I. However, that isn't how Civil War II went down. Lately, however, Captain Marvel is finally getting the respect she deserves as she has recently become the leader of the Avengers as we move into this new Avengers era. I am excited to see this kind of development happening for Carol, who has always been a strong and intelligent character who understands how how to best utilize and motivate a team. So see her in that leadership role, it's perfect for me. Number 2, Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel has barely made any appearances recently in the comics, despite being one of the greatest powerhouses that we've ever seen. It's downright rude if you ask me. If I'm missing something amazing that happened with him lately as well, let me know, but I don't think he's really even been around since the end of the Defenders Beyond series. Before that, he appeared in Doctor Doom series, I believe, but my question is, when are we getting a Blue Marvel series? Huh? Marvel? Give us that Blue Marvel series right now. I want to read it. While Blue Marvel has not been a member of the main Avengers roster, which honestly also seems insane to me, he has been a member of the Mighty Avengers, which is why I'm including him on this list. And also because, come on, Marvel, give us a solo series. Do it. Number 1, Scarlet Witch. Only now is Scarlet Witch Wanda Maximoff starting to get the story she has so long deserved. For years, Scarlet Witch was epically burdened by her past and haunted by all of her misdeeds and mistakes she had made along the way. M-Day has to have been one of the worst moments in mutant history, and it's all kinda cause of Wanda. M-Day happened in 2005 in the comics as a result of Scarlet Witch striking out at mutant kind after the events of House of M, where she attempted to create a reality where many heroes were happy. Fortunately, she is now finally moving to a place of healing, refusing to be defined by her past while running a magic shop in Lockhill, New York, with the help of MCU's Darcy, appearing in the comics for the first time. Here, finally, Wanda refused to let her past define her present self. Yes, finally. It's only taken us since 2005. It's taken so long to get to this point, but we're finally here. Ugh. Poor Wanda.
At number 10 is Red Tornado. Thank you to Sunstar808 for suggesting this one in the comments of part 1. Red Tornado was basically if Vision and Avatar Aang had a baby. Created by the villainous T.O. Morrow, this android hero's body is powered by a sentient wind elemental named Ulthun. Now, what makes him stand out is, well, he boasts some seriously impressive abilities. First off, that android body of his grants him superhuman durability, stamina, and strength, but his supernatural powers are that he can manipulate wind, allowing him to move at superhuman speeds, fly, and even generate powerful vortexes. He can even transform into a human-looking form at will, so he's basically DC's answer to Vision, y'all. And since he is an android, Red Tornado is also a computer whiz and a skilled teacher. As Sunstar808 put it in the comments, he's a powerful AI being that's often relegated to a background player, even though its abilities exceed more popular members of the Justice League. At number 9 is Zatanna. Thank you to Karen Starr for this one. Zatanna is one of the unsung heroes of the DC universe who possesses a staggering array of magical abilities. Her mystical prowess grants her dominion over both cosmic and supernatural forces, effectively rendering her as a sorceress supreme. I'm a Marvel fan. Through her unique method of backward speech known as logomancy, she can initiate a wide range of supernatural effects. This includes manipulating the very fabric of reality, altering weather patterns, controlling gravity, and even disintegrating objects with a mere word. Not limited to just a magician's bag of tricks, Zatanna can heal wounds, turn invisible, and reshape molecular structures. Telekinesis, teleportation, and the ability to create force fields further cement her as a formidable hero. She's even delved into dark magic, showcasing her willingness to pay the high cost of such power. Now, despite her astounding abilities, Zatanna's magic often exacts a toll, and she's not without her limitations, particularly in her reliance on speech for logomancy. Still, this magical maven certainly deserves more recognition and appreciation than she tends to get. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. I would really appreciate if you did. At number 8 is Superboy. Thank you to Jamie Kane 3847 for this one. Honestly, I didn't really want to bring up Connor Kent, but you guys only gave me like 9 suggestions in the comments. Speaking of which, somebody said the channel should relegate me to being a research boy, so I was determined not to do any research for this video. Thanks, Jacob. Anyways, Superboy, or Con-El, stands as one of the DC Universe's most powerful, underrated powerhouses. Born as a DNA alien clone designed to replace the fallen than Superman, he's got more than just good genes, because we've got his nifty tactical telekinesis, power that forms a force field around him which mimics Superman's abilities like super speed, super strength, flight, and invulnerability. So technically speaking, at least at first, Kon-El is simply using telekinesis to mimic Superman's powers. Now let's talk about character development. Superboy has had his share of arrogance issues, particularly thanks to his DNA mix, which includes a dash of Lex Luthor. Over time, he's earned some humility, but that ego can still sneak up and bite him in the cape, causing some messy situations. At number 7 is Raven. Also known as Rachel Roth, she's a superhero who deserves more recognition in the DC universe. Her backstory is a roller coaster of emotions. She's the half-demon daughter of Trigon, a nasty demon who wants to take over the planet. Her mom, Arella, is just a human caught up in this demon drama. Raven's got to keep her feelings in check 24/7 or she risks going full-on apocalypse mode. But here's the thing, she's got a heart of gold buried underneath all that darkness. Despite her demon daddy issues, she's found a second family in the Teen Titans. And boy oh boy does she pack a punch. She can project her consciousness, manipulate darkness, create energy constructs, and even mess with time. The list goes on and on. She can fly, teleport, control fire and electricity. I mean, Raven's got it all. In the words of Chris Bradley, who suggested this entry in part 1, Raven definitely deserves better. She is very powerful. She looks very beautiful and stunning in her costume. I also think that Raven is the DC Comics version of Scarlet Witch. Basically what I'm saying is that Raven is awesome, period. At number 6 is Mr. Terrific. Thank you to Trek Staven 4726, I think. Sorry I butchered your username. Mr. Terrific is both Terry Sloan and Michael Holt, who are DC legacy superheroes who truly deserve more attention. But I can see why they haven't really gotten any, because their superpower is literally just being a Marty stew. Terry Sloan, the original Mr. Terrific, was a remarkable individual with unmatched athletic abilities, intellect, and unwavering commitment to justice during the golden age of comics. His character serves as an inspiring symbol of what a person can achieve through determination and hard work. Later on, Michael Holt took on the mantle, the modern incarnation of Mr. Terrific, who ranks as the 3rd smartest person on the planet. Not only is he a brilliant inventor and businessman, but he's also the founding member of the Terrifics, a superhero team with unique powers and abilities. Both of these Mr. Terrifics possess an almost too good to be true quality, often seen as Marty stews because of their extraordinary capabilities. In a world filled with superpowered heroes, Mr. Terrific stands out as the embodiment of unpowered human potential, much like Batman does, except without all the clout. At number 5 is Hitman. Despite his rather grim occupation as a hitman, Tommy's character has depth that's often overlooked. He got a raw deal when he was bitten by a parasite, granting him telepathy and X-ray vision. This upgrade could have propelled him into the spotlight, but sadly, he remains a hidden gem. His telepathic powers, though limited, gave him an edge in battles. He could sense impending threats, making him a formidable opponent, and on top of that, his X-ray vision allowed him to see through objects and environments, obviously. Tommy's military training equipped him with firearm skills, but he's far from invincible, often being outmatched. Plus, his telepathy came at the cost of chronic migraines, which he tried to alleviate with alcohol, showcasing his very human side. The fact that Tommy hasn't made it to live-action adaptations, not even appearing in the Arrowverse, is definitely a mystery. Perhaps James Gunn can give this underrated hero the recognition he deserves. At number 4 is Metamorpho. Metamorpho is the Element Man, a diamond in the rough in the world of DC superheroes. Imagine having the power to morph your body into any element you desire, from liquid to gas to solid, even toxic compounds. Rex Mason's transformation was triggered by exposure to an ancient meteorite's energy, turning him into a metahuman with a twisty, stretchy, and bouncy physique reminiscent of rubber. He's basically a walking chemistry lab and a living Swiss Army knife with the ability to create gadgets on the fly. But here's the kicker, he's not just about elemental fun and games. Metamorpho packs a punch with superhuman strength and durability. He's a skilled martial artist and has an uncanny knack for aviation and investigation. Yet this elemental hero remains largely unappreciated. He's been a part of various superhuman teams, but he's never quite demonstrated his full potential. And number 3 is Element Girl, who gained her powers by replicating the very incident that gave Metamorpho his abilities, becoming a metamorphite just like him. By the way, this entry, the last entry, was suggested by Trek Extravagant 4726. Thank you very much. Anyways, thanks to Amun-Ra, the sun god of Egypt, she could transform her body into any elemental compound and manipulate it at will. Sadly, her life took a dark turn. After leaving the CIA, she sank into depression due to her transformed appearance, which left her feeling like a freak. She attempted to unalive herself multiple times, but her powers prevented her from doing so. It was only when the essence of being unalive itself intervened that she found relief. She then implored Ra to take away her powers, allowing her to finally find eternal peace. In the end, despite her incredible abilities, depression was her greatest weakness, and it's a reminder of the importance of mental health even for the most powerful superheroes. And number 2 is Doom Patrol. The Doom Patrol is a team of metahuman heroes who often go unnoticed in the vast world of DC superheroes, but they truly deserve better recognition. This unique group consists of individuals who've been shunned by society due to their unusual powers, which have caused them immense alienation and trauma. Led by Niles Calder, known as the Chief, who was actually fired because they suspected him for causing the origin stories of a lot of these superheroes to begin with. The Doom Patrol faces foes in situations that are downright bizarre, making their adventures stand out among all the other superhero teams in DC. Their lineup includes Beast Boy, who can morph into any animal, Elastigirl, who, her power speaks for itself. Mento, who went back in time to try to prevent himself from taking over the future, super cool, and Robot Man, a former race car driver who now inhabits a formidable android body. In my opinion, the Doom Patrol boasts some of the most potent heroes in the DC universe, and it's high time they receive the recognition and love they truly deserve. Adam Eve, recommended by William Kituri, who technically isn't even a DC character, but you recommended it, and there is a DC crossover at one point, so I'm gonna allow it. As Adam Eve, her main power is subatomic manipulation, meaning that with sheer willpower alone, she can sense and manipulate matter and energy at the subatomic level, essentially reshaping reality. Flight? No problem. Adam Eve alters air density to soar through the skies. Force fields? Yep, she conjures them up using her transmutation powers. And she's even got telekinesis too. Energy blasts? Yeah, she's got that too. And while she commands nature's elements at the subatomic level, rearranging atoms and molecules to transmute matter, her powers don't typically work when used on organic life. You see, mental blocks limit her abilities, but extreme emotional moments can shatter those barriers, allowing her to unleash her power on organic matter. But for someone who can allegedly rearrange atoms on a molecular level, she doesn't always seem to be using it most effectively. She could take out whoever she wanted by, say, turning the air in your lungs to ammonia. Let's get real. Even with the cap on organic life, she should still be way more OP than she's depicted.
Alright, kicking off the list at number 10 today is Martian Manhunter. Now look, Martian Manhunter may be one of the main Justice League members, but he gets slept on way too much. I will always reference this when describing John's power, but there is a panel from the New 52 when Martian Manhunter is fighting off all the members of the Justice League at the same time. With his left hand, Manhunter is using his shape-shifting ability to turn that hand into a massive spiked club and whacking away both Cyborg and Green Lantern. With his right hand, I think it's safe to say he's showing off his super strength, as he's got a power grip on the lasso of truth, and I'm assuming he's just resisting its power. Behind him is Aquaman, who's jabbing John with his trident, but the trident is just phasing through him because John can become intangible. Then we got Superman, who's flying around the fight at a decent distance while Manhunter uses his heat vision to keep him there. And then the funniest part is Batman doing absolutely nothing, just picking up the Flash, who seems to have just been knocked down. It's almost a perfect display of his abilities, but leaving out a handful and one of the biggest. John is the most powerful telepath on Earth, and one of the most powerful in the entire universe. Martian Manhunter has been called the most powerful being on the planet, and he's at the top of the list of people that Superman is afraid to fight. Number 9, Booster Gold. Poor old Booster Gold, the greatest hero that you've probably never heard of. His day job involves traveling through time and space, ensuring that events that are meant to happen do happen, and he absolutely rocks at it. There was even a time that Booster went so far as to create an entire second persona named Supernova for himself, while simultaneously faking a psychological breakdown and eventually faking the passing of his own Booster Gold identity, all while he went and successfully replaced several major superheroes who were missing at the time, including Superman. The thing about Booster Gold is that in order to protect himself from other time travelers, Booster has to come across as a failure. An absolute dumpster fire of mediocrity. Somebody that no one will ever want to bother with remembering anything about in the future. That's why Booster has this shtick of being greedy, incompetent, and attention-seeking, which actually kind of began as genuine, but has long since been a facade. He willingly endures a life of ridicule from the people he protects without them knowing, because when you're dealing with time travel, being the butt of the joke actually gives you an advantage. Booster is also called upon to maintain events which are pretty much less than excellent, like ensuring that bad things that have to happen actually happen. For example, he routinely guards a little German baby boy born on the 20th of April 1889 in a small town in Austria-Hungary from other first-time time-traveling superheroes. He does all of those things because the alternative is the complete unraveling of all time and space and the destruction of everything. Number 8, Firestorm. Where do we even start with Firestorm? The main version of the character is Ronnie Raymond, who is fused with his professor, Martin Stein. But there are a lot of other versions of Firestorm, a lot of whom are either one person or different fusions of other people. It's annoyingly complex. The character, as you might guess, has pyrokinetic abilities plus durability, flight, reflexes, and super strength. But the character's main thing is that they can rearrange the molecules of matter. Now, this ability is obviously incredibly OP, and it would simply take one story to make him completely god level, but for the most part, writers kind of misuse him. Potentially, this character could transform entire planets into whatever he wanted. With this power, Firestorm's done some pretty godlike things. For example, Firestorm manifested a pink bunny mascot suit out of thin air around the villain's skull crusher. He's turned explosions into a jack-in-the-box and a cement truck into a giant teddy bear. It's kind of hilarious, but like low-key, absolutely insane. On a way less hilarious note, he also turned a girl into salt when he was resurrected as Deathstorm. And in Doomsday Clock, Firestorm accidentally turned a crowd of Russian protesters into glass. But outside of matter manipulation, Firestorm has had some impressive feats, like surviving the nuclear meltdown that originally created the hero and absorbing all the excess radiation. And another time, Firestorm survived a straight-on nuclear explosion. An alternate version of the character called Deathstorm was able to absorb and capture 3 different Justice League teams into its own Firestorm matrix. And in Infinite Crisis, Firestorm was able to seal a multiversal rift. In case you haven't noticed, we have kind of moved away from physically unstoppable characters to characters that are just pure science fiction gods. Number 7, John Constantine. John Constantine is a really fun inclusion for this list because he is extremely powerful and not powerful at all at the same time. John can wield magic for sure through years and years of learning, training, traveling, but he doesn't have any kind of magical affinity or any kind of beneficial magical family heritage. John relies on actual magic as a very last resort, and the magic he knows how to use isn't anything to scoff at. He has even, very momentarily, been able to hold back Dr. Fate, but using magic comes at a cost, and he knows this. So what Constantine prefers is trickery. Lies, deceit, traps, his wits, weapons, artifacts, backup, and calling in favors. John smokes, he drinks, he's in his middle ages, and he ain't in the greatest of health. He can throw a punch, for sure, but most people are a physical match for him. But at the same time, he has been able to trick, outsmart, or overpower gods, demons, and angels. Batman, Superman, Darkseid, Swamp Thing, Dr. Fate, the Phantom Stranger, the Spirit of Justice, the Spectre, the Spirit of Vengeance, Lucifer, and even the Presence, who's basically DC's version of God. He tricked them all. He tricked the Presence into curing John of cancer and granting him divine protection by selling his soul to 3 separate Hell Lords who would start a civil war over his soul, which would spill out onto Earth and into heaven. Don't sleep on this bad-mouthed middle-aged man. Number 6. Atom Smasher. Thanks to exposure to radiation, Atom Smasher is already an incredibly impressive looking guy. He stands at 7 foot 6 inches tall, and he is jacked. This guy's bicep is probably bigger than my torso, which isn't really saying much, but his real power is being able to grow even bigger. He has the power of atomic dispersal, meaning he is able to control the distance between his atoms, increasing to anywhere from 28 to 60 feet in height. His mass, durability, strength, speed, and stamina are all increased even more so as he grows. Now, Albert Rothstein made his superhero debut under a different name. Initially, Al went by the superhero alias of Nuklon, and he was an original member of the superhero team called Infinity Inc. But following in his godfather, the Atom's footsteps, Albert took on his Atom Smasher name and joined up with the Justice Society of America in JSA number 1 by James Robinson. The thing about Atom Smasher that makes me think he deserves better is his entire interaction with Black Adam. When Black Adam joined the JSA, one of its members that he happened to get close with was Atom Smasher, and he even convinced Smasher to leave the team and start an anti-hero team instead, which led Smasher down a darker path, even becoming part of the Suicide Squad for a time. He has been redeemed since, but I don't think he ever really deserved that in the first place. Number 5, Hawkman. Hawkman is a doozy to talk about. Essentially, he has two main origins. He was either a space cop or a reincarnated prince, and sometimes both. Basically, Hawkman's secret identity is Carter Hall, an archaeologist and a museum creator who is actually a reincarnation of the ancient Egyptian prince, Khufu. Now Khufu, who would become known as Hawkman, discovered an alien spacecraft from the planet Thanagar powered by an anti-gravity element called the Nth metal, which transformed his soul and doomed him and his love to be reincarnated over and over again throughout time. Some of his incarnations include Brian Kent, the Silent Knight from 5th century Britain, Conrad von Grimm, the son of a blacksmith in 14th century Germany, Captain John Smith of the 16th century English colony in Virginia, Hannibal Hawks, the Nighthawk in the American Old West, Detective James Wright, a Pinkerton detective in the early 20th century, and finally, Carter Hall himself. Whether it's because of his really confusing origins, or maybe because people don't realize how cool this character actually is, he just kinda seems to suck. And when I was a kid, I thought he was super cool. Oh, to be an innocent, sweet child again. Number 4, Raven. Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go brought the new Teen Titans to a big audience, and one character who really stood out is Raven. She's been like the character on that team that everyone seems to like regardless of who you are. Seriously, you can't go to a comic book convention without seeing someone rocking a Raven cosplay. She's like the goth icon for superhero fans. Raven's super popular, and it's kind of strange that DC hasn't done more with her. She's got an awesome but also absolutely terribly upsetting backstory, crazy strong powers that could literally destroy all we hold dear, and a personality that fans absolutely adore. Honestly, she could totally be DC's version of a much better and more interesting Scarlet Witch without any trouble. It's just frustrating that DC isn't giving her more love in the comics like they do in the shows. Number 3, Aquaman. The ocean is a genuinely terrifying and interesting place. As such, the Atlanteans of DC Comics possess a few advantages over us regular humans. They have super strength, speed, endurance, and durability, all in order to help them survive the mind-boggling pressure at the insane depths of the ocean at which they live. But Aquaman himself is a royal Atlantean, which means that he is a super Atlantean. His strength and durability has allowed him to close the Marianas Trench, which I don't even know how that works, go toe-to-toe with powerful foes like Martian Manhunter, Lobo, and Wonder Woman, and tank blasts from Starro. His speed, which is often forgotten about, allows him to swim at 10,000 feet per second, and he can move even faster without the pressure of water drag, allowing him to dodge bullets and catch lasers. But Aquaman has quite a few other advantages. His control over sea life has helped him in a large majority of his fights, with his underwater allies coming to his aid and helping him do things he probably couldn't do alone, like creating a massive tsunami with whales. His telepathic skill is actually quite impressive as well. Some of my favorite feats include him telepathically controlling a Green Lantern ring, reading the Martian Manhunter's mind without permission, and controlling a space dragon. For a while, he also had a hand that was a hook, and then that became a magical mystical water hand that could do a whole other level of feats, but I'm kind of out of time, so we're moving on. Number 2, Animal Man. Thanks to an encounter with some rather strange aliens, Bernard Buddy Baker gained access to the morphogenic field, otherwise known as the Red. This field basically allows Buddy to absorb and use different attributes of nearby animals while still being a human. So, he has been able to move his eyes independently like a chameleon, he's been able to ram against a speeding car with the abilities of a rhino, he can fly by tapping into birds, he's regenerated a whole lost limb by tapping into an earthworm, gained the strength to lift a car by tapping into a spider, and he's ran at 75 miles per hour by adopting the abilities of an ant. But his abilities have done some even more surprising things, like for example, when a villain cut Buddy off from the nearby animals by putting him in a room, he took on the attributes of the bacteria inside that villain's body, allowing Animal Man to duplicate himself. He can even tap into the attributes of extinct animals like dinosaurs, which has allowed him to punch out a T-Rex and survive being crashed into by a plane. Over time, he's received power boosts that allow him to use multiple abilities at once, and then to even use the abilities of any animal in the universe, like when he used the power of a quote sun eater, which let him fly across the galaxy in an instant. Number 1, Icon. While Milestone's Dakotaverse isn't currently a part of the DC universe, the New 52 previously merged the universes together with the Wildstorm reality. Icon returned as the most powerful Milestone character in the new Earth M setting. He was originally an alien named Arnis, whose ship crashed on an Earth plantation. Arnis was raised as an unwilling servant named Augustus Freeman until his memories and powers developed during the Civil War. He spent 100 years working as a lawyer before Raquel Irvin convinced him to become the costumed hero Icon and set an example for others. Icon has incredible strength that rivals Superman's. Icon also has incredible reserves of energy that he can project in various forms. He's one of the best Superman-like characters, and yet I feel like he just hasn't been given any real good times to shine recently. It's like DC kinda just forgot about him and a lot of the Dakotaverse alongside him.
Number 10, Batwoman. I love Batwoman, but I feel like so many times she honestly gets shafted, especially in regard to her connection to the Bat family. Granted, Kate Kane does often like to be independent from her cousin, Bruce Wayne, but she's still a member of the family, and I don't think she really gets featured enough in the comics. While she has been featured elsewhere in the DC universe, she hasn't had her own self-titled series since 2018, and even then, that series only lasted for a year, from 2017 to 2018, having just shy of 20 issues. You might think, wow, well, that's still a good accomplishment in modern day comics, and you're right. However, when you look at, how long Batman always goes on for, we could have a little bit more Batwoman than like whatever she got, like 18, 19 issues. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you want more DC content from us, do I have good news for you? We have a DC Comics playlist, so go check that out. Number 9, Stargirl. Stargirl is one of those characters that I just feel we don't see enough of in the comics. Now, she has had her moments in the comics, and she did end up getting her own TV show, it is true, but considering that she did have her own TV series, I was kind of hoping we get to see more of her in the comics as a result. And in recent years, since her series started, this hasn't really been as much the case. Now, she has been on the Justice League before, sure, and she's had her own mini-series as recently as 2022, which is pretty good, but we still have never had an ongoing comic series for Stargirl. Like, she's never had a self-titled ongoing. And considering how cool Courtney Whitmore is and how much she's loved by the fans, it's honestly just kind of unfortunate. Number 8, Big Barda. Big Barda is another hero who often feels invincible in terms of her approach to heroism. Big Barda herself is a new god. She hails from Apokolips, where she was once one of Darkseid's fearsome female furies. Despite the fact that Big Barda has recently resurfaced joining up with the Birds of Prey, which honestly I think is a great fit for her, she hasn't been regularly featured prior to this for some time. And I feel like she is a character who deserves more hype in the comics. Heck, even in the movies. Where is our Big Barda solo film, huh? I feel like actually James Gunn would probably do a really good job of putting that together, the Big Barda solo film. Oh, I would watch that. I would be in that. I don't know if I'm jacked enough to be Big Barda, but I'd get jacked to be Big Barda. She's so cool. Number 7, Naomi. Naomi is probably one of the most powerful of the newer heroes that we've seen. But do most people even know who she is? Probably not. Amber, do you know who she is, Naomi? Nope, see, there you go. Despite her powers being comparable, and I would argue even stronger than characters like Superman, she isn't often heavily featured in the comics. Unlike Superman, whose weakness is actually magic, Naomi bolsters magic around her. Haha! So magic does not have the same negative effect on her, but instead works almost in the exact opposite way. Her powers allow her to generate energy, which she can then use to boost her powers or any magic or magical beings around her. I'm still waiting for an epic Zatanna and Naomi team up to happen in the comics, and yes, I know Naomi had her own TV series, but she also only got one season of that. And while I've heard some great things about it, overall it seems like the series was met with a mixed reception between audience and critics. So, although honestly, I gotta watch it. I should watch the Naomi series. Bet I'd probably enjoy at least some of it. I mean, I'm surprised I'm enjoying Gotham Knights as much as I am, even though that show is an experience. Number 6, Killer Frost. Caitlin Snow is truly a character that has sat on the periphery of the DC mainstream for years and years. Yet despite being super cool, pun intended, and interesting in regards to her backstory, whether we're focusing on Caitlin honestly or even her predecessor, Louise Lincoln, but especially Caitlin, she barely gets featured in the comics, appearing less than 100 times in the last 10 years. If we're talking about Caitlin Snow, that is. And that's even with a version of Caitlin's character being adapted for the CW Arrowverse television series The Flash, appearing as one of the key members of the Flash's support team there. Number 5, Batgirl. One of the weirdest things with DC is how sometimes they just completely leave their stories open to being canon or not, depending on how fans receive those stories. And one of the weirdest incidents of this happening was actually with The Killing Joke. Now, The Killing Joke was written by Alan Moore and was never intended by him to be necessarily a part of the main continuity. And as far as I know, it still isn't even really fully canon, except for one part of that story, the successful attack on Barbara Gordon by the Joker, which left her both traumatized and paralyzed from the waist down. Why this was the only thing we chose to keep from this story, I don't know, but the whole idea of it just feels super weird to me, especially when you consider how brutal and graphic this attack was against Barbara. And Barbara gets no opportunity to defend herself, having been surprised by the Joker's visit while visiting her dad in her civilian form. That being said, she's still Barbara Gordon, so you still would think, you know, maybe she do something, but no. This element of the story would change Barbara's life forever, and although I do like Babs as Oracle, it feels like she was robbed of some agency here. In fact, it feels like she was robbed of a lot of agency here, especially when you consider the story was never really intended to be incorporated into the canon. Barbara Gordon has since managed to heal and return to her role as Batgirl while still keeping all the skills she was shown to have as the brilliant hacker and computer whiz Oracle. But I still feel like the fact that she suffered so severely from what was intended to be a story that existed outside of canon is brutal. Number 4, Blackfire. You know you deserve better when I've barely talked about you as a character on the channel when I've been working here for almost 5 years. Yikes. Poor Blackfire. I'm sorry, Blackfire. I'm sorry for my part in this. I feel like the thing I'd personally love to see more of from a character like Blackfire is perspective in the comics. Blackfire is the evil sister of Starfire. And I mean, she is really evil. And while she might be one of the best of the worst around, I would say she does ultimately lack some depth. Sure, she is really, really bad, but I've always found her to be more surface level in terms of her motivation behind why she does what she does. In the New Earth continuity, it's the lack of respect and love from her people and her jealousy for her young sister, Coriander, Starfire, who got all that love instead, that basically drives her to do such terrible things. In the Prime Earth continuity, this is less focused on, but still plays a role. And even in the New Earth continuity, I'd like to see more of this in terms of the nuances of Commander's character. I understand her being jealous, I get that, but how else does this affect the way the Blackfire sees not just like her sister, but like the whole world? How else does she justify such terrible actions? Is there any way to get across to her and potentially reach her on an emotional level? I want to feel for Commander, and I often feel she's robbed of any kind of sympathetic perspective, even with everything she went through as a child. I mean, like, I do feel bad for her in terms of like what happened to her, but I just feel like we never really get to connect with her, you know? And I think I'd like to do that more. Is that weird? People are gonna be like, why you want to connect with this super evil character? look, I love evil characters, and I think sometimes they have reasons. Number 3, Variant. Talk about women who have been shafted in the comics. How about any of these cyber women that we have seen who have acted as female counterparts to Cyborg? Among them is Variant. Variant only made a handful of appearances before she was tragically just like kind of written out, but I do think her character had promise, and I've always felt it would be cool for Cyborg to have someone to talk to who really gets what it's like to live as he does and share his perspective. Scarlet Taylor is very similar to Cyborg in that regard, being a member of the CIA who almost lost her life on a mission and was saved by being transformed into a cyborg like Cyborg himself was. Number 2, Vixen. Vixen is a supermodel turned businesswoman and in the current continuity a supermodel slash fashion designer turned primetime show host and animal activist. Well, it's more than likely that Vixen has been an animal activist ever since she possessed the superpower to take various animal shapes. Armed with the Tantu totem, she can transform into various different animals and harness their own unique abilities and powers. And even without the totem, she currently still can call on at least some of its power, giving herself like animal characteristics basically. Still, despite having this insane amount of power at her fingertips and the fact that she has a pretty cool backstory is stunning and is a badass, we don't see Vixen featured that often in the comics. When we talk about Halle Berry and DC, that Catwoman movie, look, that wasn't great, but I feel like Vixen would have been an amazing character to see Barry in the role of. Number 1, Circe. While Hecate and Hera are both goddesses, at one point Circe is even more powerful than the both of them, after she takes within herself all of Hecate's power, which allows her to tap into the source of magic. Even without being able to tap into the source of magic, Circe is known for being a fearsome and powerful witch who can easily defeat many of those who would stand against her. And yet despite this, we haven't really seen Circe focused on as a villain in what honestly feels to me like forever. I know it hasn't been that long, but it feels like forever. In Justice League Dark by James Tynion IV, we even get a great look into Circe's tragic backstory that shows us why Circe is as power hungry and ruthless as she is. She didn't necessarily have the easiest life, guys. It comes from a place of self-preservation because she was so cruelly mistreated by the world, and yet despite building up her character, it still often feels like she falls by the wayside at DC Comics. She's such a cool character. She should have her own series, honestly. Number 10, Captain Marvel. In the comic book Avengers issue 197, published in 1980, Carol Danvers, who is then known as Miss Marvel, discovers that she is pregnant. However, she has no recollection of how it happened, and the baby grows at an alarming rate. Shortly after that, in Avengers issue 200, Carol gives birth to the baby, who also grows up at an alarming rate, and names himself Marcus. The Avengers seem excited about the birth, despite the bizarre circumstances of it, and Carol is made to feel like she is basically overreacting by not sharing in their enthusiasm and excitement for her. As Marcus grows, it is revealed that he is actually the son of Immortus, a ruler of Limbo, not Magic's Limbo, but a different Limbo. Immortus, by the way, is one of the alternate timeline incarnations of Kang the Conqueror. Immortus had impregnated a woman he had plucked from time, Marcus's mother, and Marcus was trapped in Limbo until he could be born on Earth. Marcus had basically brought Carol to Limbo, specifically mentioning that she actually reminded him of his mother, a little weird, and used charm and his father's subtle manipulation devices and methods to impregnate her so that he could be born on Earth. Yikes. In the end, despite the large piles of red flags, many piles of red flags everywhere, Carol decides randomly that she actually feels empathy for Marcus, not knowing whether this is coming from herself or actually from his influence over her, and her friends and colleagues, her family, the Avengers, just basically smile and wave goodbye as she rides off into the sunset with the man who she is most definitely a victim of. Her lover turned son turned sort of love once more, Marcus Immortus. Oh boy. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when we talk about some of the more questionable things that have been done in comics, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button. Number 9, Photon. While Monica Rambeau may finally be seeing some appreciation in the comics today, this wasn't always the case. I would say she started off with a bang in the comics, but then shortly after was kind of shafted multiple times over. Needless to say, she did recently get a 5-issue mini written by Eve Ewing, no relation to Al Ewing by the way, which I am super excited to read, but I personally think Monica deserves a whole ongoing series all her own. That's how awesome and powerful she is. Number 8, Rogue. So I'm not going to lie, I actually love Rogue's weakness. Former weakness now, I guess. Rogue was one of my favorite characters growing up, and I think what I loved about her so much was the tragedy of her story and her powers. But what's even more, I love the way that Rogue overcame them in the comics. Still, in overcoming her fears to gain full control over her powers, Rogue actually became kinda harder to write, I think. She's just honestly too powerful. This is why I feel like we don't get as many Rogue-focused stories these days in the comics. Sure, she and Gambit have their team-up series going on, but I was really hoping for a Rogue solo story during the days of Krakoa. Jonathan Hickman planned to write one, but ultimately decided against it when he agreed to hand over creative control to his X-Men team as opposed to staying in charge of the main plot of the Krakoa era as the head of X-Desk. I still really want that Hickman Rogue story, and I'm hoping that we get it, because yeah, I feel like there's so much more we could do with Rogue in the comics. Number 7. Jean Grey. Despite being written as a powerhouse in the comics, Jean has a long history of weird choices being made for her character. And also initially she was basically just written to be a damsel in distress for a lot of the early days of the X-Men. She has constantly been killed off, in some cases to advance the story of her male heroic counterparts, whether that be motivating them to take some action or simply kind of freeing them from their romantic obligation to her. Number 6. Wasp. Janet Van Dyne. In the Ultimate Universe, Janet wasn't treated very well, but I'd also argue in the main continuity, Janet has had it, honestly, pretty rough. Initially, she was kind of like the sidekick to Ant-Man, and then it was revealed that he was not mentally stable, meaning that Janet, as his wife, had to put up with a lot, considering that Hank was later believed to be undiagnosed bipolar. Not blaming Hank for his own mental illness here, but just acknowledging that as a result, Janet had a lot that she had to live with as his partner and cope with. Eventually, the two do divorce, and then from a hero's perspective, Janet kind of slowly starts to fade away as Hank becomes less and less relevant. Number 5. Isca the Unbeaten. Isca is a super interesting character. On one hand, she's extremely powerful and can never lose. She can even potentially have her power utilized to manipulate the stakes of other competitions that she is pulled into herself. However, this also implies that there are times when she has zero control over her powers, in the sense that she cannot influence the result of an unbalanced battle. In fact, her powers will pull her to serve the side that will be victorious, regardless of whether or not she wants to in terms of what her mind or her heart says to her. This means that Isca has been forced to turn her back on her own people, the mutants of Arakko, more than once. She's also had to fight against her own family and colleagues before as a result. Although the one thing she can control at times is how she fights in a battle, which I think is interesting. Meaning if she has the option, she can basically try to fight others involved as opposed to those that she's close to. Despite the fact that she has done her best by choosing her opponents to help mitigate how she might be used to turn the tide in a battle, she still is sometimes painted unfairly, I would say, as a villain, when really she is a strong warrior who simply sometimes has no say in terms of her allegiances thanks to her powers. I really hope we get to see more of her and get to dive more into how being forced to turn on her allies at times has truly, probably deeply affected her. Number 4. Wasp. Nadia Van Dyne. Janet even got replaced basically by her adoptive daughter, a younger version of the Wasp, Nadia Van Dyne, who was actually Hank's biological daughter from his previous marriage, who, well, he basically never knew existed. Nadia returned to the US after escaping the Russian Red Room, only to find out that Hank had actually died. She ended up bonding with Janet and ultimately taking up the Wasp mantle with her blessing, also taking her last name as well. I don't mind too much that Nadia is also now the Wasp. I just wish that Janet could also remain relevant while this was going on. In fact, despite Nadia also being a cool new character, I don't even think that she has stayed very relevant since her very recent introduction to the comic, which is unfortunate as well. Wasp is so cool, but yet we can't have any Wasps that are super important lately. Number 3. Madelyne Pryor. I'm sure many of you at this point know how I feel about Maddie, but for those who don't, Madelyne Pryor is basically the evil clone of Jean Grey, who initially wasn't evil at all. She's also been known before as the Goblin Queen. However, the fact that Maddie was always shafted and then eventually realized that the choices made in her life were manipulated and orchestrated into happening by Mr. Sinister prompted her to basically have a mental breakdown, honestly pretty reasonable, and turn on those who she had once called her allies and friends. That's when she ends up becoming the Goblin Queen. Number 2. Scarlet Witch. M-Day has to have been one of the worst moments in mutant history. M-Day happened in 2005 in the comics as a result of Scarlet Witch striking out at mutant kind after the events of House of M, where she attempted to create a reality where many heroes were happy, but after learning of its falseness, was once again rejected by all those heroes she had actually tried to help here. Pretty devastating, especially when, while Wanda was warping reality here, she was doing so in an effort to not only defend herself, but also make herself and all of her friends happy. In fact, I would argue her friends and teammates, the Avengers, were somewhat, and in fact, I would say just full on, complicit in what happened, since they never really reached out to Wanda to try and help her when she was struggling emotionally, prompting her to warp reality, which ultimately led to her wiping out almost all mutants during M-Day. And if you don't believe me that that is the case, I mean, there's literally an alternate reality where if Jessica Jones was there, pretty much none of this would have happened, so yeah. M-Day happened mainly because Wanda was striking out at her believed to be father at the time, Magneto, who she claimed loved mutant kind more than he did his own family. Wanda said the words "no more mutants," and with that small utterance, depowered or destroyed millions of mutants the world over. An action that would cement her as one of the greatest mutant villains in comics for years beyond, despite her long-standing history before this working as a hero. Number 1. Wasp. Ultimates. Oh boy, probably the worst one, I would say. Pretty bad. Janet Van Dyne's death in the Ultimate Universe has to be, honestly, one of the worst things. First of all, we don't even show her enough respect to give her an on-panel death, as she drowns during the tidal wave in Ultimatum, one of the many poor victims who perished off-panel, despite, like many others, deserving an on-panel death. But really, when we're talking about those that deserved an on-panel death, Jan is really top tier. She's really high up there, especially considering Janet was actually the leader of the Ultimates at this point. So not only are we off to a bad start here, but then she also gets eaten by the Blob for some reason. It's also weird that they decided to make the Blob do this. I know he's a bad guy, I know he's a villain, but he isn't typically known to like be a cannibal anywhere else in the Marvel multiverse, pretty much ever. The Ultimate Universe had a weird and unhealthy obsession with cannibalism initially, at least, it felt like.